got to turn the mic on, they tell me. All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to the CTE Committee public meeting, end of January. Good to see everybody. We've got a very ambitious agenda today, which I'll talk you through in just a minute. But first, I want to thank Dr. Wright and the team at MSDE for hosting us here. We had a wonderful lunch and learn in advance of this meeting's incredible work that's being done by the CTE team and really all of Dr. Wright's team. So really appreciate you guys for hosting us. Okay, we're going to cover a handful of things today. We're going to start with IRC approvals. Then we're going to move into reviewing our draft annual report for submission, and a component of that annual report is our CTE framework. So we'll be reviewing both of those, and then we'll talk about career coaching definitions and tentative metrics. That will not be a voting item. That'll be just a discussion item for the group. The first three will be voting items. So before we continue, Molly, would you please take roll and make sure we've got a quorum present?
Absolutely. The members that we have present in the room are Brian Cavey, Sharnetta Young, Myra Norton, Dr. Wright, and Michael Thomas. The members joining virtually are Dr. Rye, Secretary Anderson, and Matt Holloway. So we do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Okay, first and easiest order of business is to approve the minutes from our November 13th meeting. All the committee members received those minutes in advance of this meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. The second part of this is IRCs. This is the first round of implementing our new process here for approving IRCs. So just as a reminder, the committee approved a policy and a process such that folks can submit applications to MSDE for new proposed industry recognized credentials. Team at MSDE then reviews those according to the standards and the metrics that we as a committee decided, and brings back to the committee basically three categories. So puts all the applicants into sort of three big buckets. The first bucket is, these are IRCs that we recommend for approval. They meet all of the requirements that the committee has set, and we recommend we move forward. Second category is, we do not recommend moving forward on a set of IRCs. So that means they have run these through the requirements that the committee set, and they don't meet some subset of those requirements. And so they say we should not move forward with these IRCs. And then the third bucket is what I would call a gray area, and there are a couple of different categories of these where there needs to be some more discussion or some revisions are recommended. And so what we decided as a committee in terms of the process is that we would vote on the first two categories, so those that are approved and recommended to move forward, and those that are not recommended for moving forward or recommended to not be approved. And then the gray area, we're going to move into a 60-day period of investigation, discussion, and working together to determine, okay, for those that are in the sort of gray area, which category should they be placed in? Should they be approved? Should they not be approved? So everyone good with, I just wanted to remind everyone of the process we agreed to. And so this is the first run of that. And I'm going to ask Richard Kincaid and his team to walk us through the set of industry recognized credentials and the process, all of that. They're going to tell us lots of good stuff. I also want to say part of what they will talk about in addition to those kind of three broad categories I just mentioned is some administrative changes that we want to contemplate approving today. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the committee. I certainly share our appreciation for all who are joining us at MSDE headquarters today. That is absolutely an environment that is representing what we believe is our collective commitment to putting our young people first for the sake of shaping the future of our education and our workforce together, and also where I believe that we're setting a precedent for how the blueprint can support students in achieving meaningful credentials that are going to align with industry needs and with classroom standards. And so we are excited to share how our team has carefully approached the implementation process that was the result of careful collaboration, data analysis, and alignment with the goals of the Maryland Blueprint. Next slide.
Oh, yeah. How about if you guys tell us who you are?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Myra.
I mean, to be fair, we know, but there's a lot of people watching who don't know. So why don't you do that?
Our pleasure. My name is Tracy Kittle, and I currently serve as the Director of Apprenticeships and Industry Recognized Credentials in the Office of College and Career Pathways at the Maryland State Department of Education.
My name is Pam. My name is Pam Clay, and I am the Coordinator for Apprenticeship and Industry Recognized Credentials with the Office of College and Career Pathways at the Maryland State Department of Education.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder.
You bet.
So this slide here shares our objectives for this period together. We are going to review MSDE's implementation process in further detail. We are going to be able to preview a small bit of the IRC application data from this first cycle. We will be able to introduce a few of the decisions and business rules that were discussed as we examined those applications, and then we'll be able to think through what are some recommendations that we could provide to really strengthen the application for Cycle 2 since this was such a norming year for us, and then be able to chat through what those implementation next steps might look like. All right. So for the sake of efficiency, definitely want to breeze over this slide here, but absolutely give a nod to the blueprint legislation and to the CTE Committee's policy that has really brought us all here together today, and for what serves as a scaffolding for what's really going to shape our dialogue. So to actually kick us off, I am very excited to hand things over to Pamela Clay, who is our Coordinator of Apprenticeship and Industry Recognized Credentials. And notably, Pam has been a servant leader in the state of Maryland for over 41 years. Many of those years, she has been a former CTE director in Talbot County. And in that role, she led the day-to-day operations of implementing state policies. For over 4 decades, she did that at the local level and has been so committed to our young people that we convinced her to come back and to co-lead this work with us. And so I could not think of a person better suited to introduce how the IRC process was shaped and how our applicants and our applications were supported throughout this process.
Next slide. In the past year, the Governor's Workforce Development Board, CTE Committee, developed the IRC policy. And in this policy, the committee determined that the IRC must meet the following 7 core criteria and 2 optional criteria. They are align in demand occupations, provide documented outcomes, validated by industry, assessment-based, standards-driven, attainable and accessible, portable, stackable, preferred but not required for approval, and renewable, which is also preferred but not required for approval. The CTE IRC policy also included a timeline for making requests for credentials to be reviewed to move through the approval process. The online application opened in August and closed October 31st. In November, MSDE IRC Committee started reviewing each submission for completion to make a recommendation to approve or not approve an application. In December, MSDE prepared submission packages for each IRC application. All applications and recommendations were sent to you, the CTE Committee. The reason we're here today is because we would like the CTE Committee to make a determination based on MSDE's recommendations. Once approved, the IRC will be added to the state-approved list. MSDE and the CTE Committee will publish the list for the upcoming school year, and this list will go into effect for the upcoming school year. Once the application opened on August 26, MSDE launched a new website or web page, which you will find in the link on page 1 of the report. On the webpage, it highlighted the IRC policy, application link, and a sample application. You will also find the MSCE IRC Review Committee list also on page 1 of the report. When an application was flagged as incomplete, MSCE promptly contacted the applicant with clear instructions to resolve the issues. If further clarification was needed, MSCE arranged or responded to requests for a Google Meet or phone call to discuss and ensure any understanding that might need to be taking place at that time. Each email communication acknowledged the submission, thanked the applicant, and provided detailed guidance on criteria, qualifications, and requirements, along with links to resources and sample artifacts. Applicants were encouraged to review these resources and reach out for support as needed. MSCE maintained detailed records of all communications, including emails and meetings, to ensure transparency and accountability, and that helped shape the data the committee has available to them on this report, which is on pages 2 through 6. Now we will go into the information about the application process.
Thank you so much, Pam. So these here listed on the screen, the committee can see the application outcomes that were delineated and analyzed in a variety of ways. Those can also be found between pages 3 and pages 6 in the report that's been provided to you in your reading packet. For anyone listening, the application will, following this meeting, be available for public consumption. And so in today's conversation, we're going to present an abbreviated version of the quantitative data with additional aggregated data available on the comprehensive report, which has the applications broken down by career cluster as well as by geographical location around the state, for those who may be interested in reviewing it at a later date. So, with that said, between August 26th, when the application opened, and October 31st, MSDE received a total of 91 applications for industry-recognized credentials from various stakeholders and partners across the state of Maryland. 68 of those applications were unique and non-duplicative. And we do think that's important to highlight that while there were 91 total applications submitted, only 68 of those applications were unique and non-duplicative. And so we just wanted to make note of that because it does interchange throughout the report, and did think that that was an important distinction to emphasize. We also wanted to highlight, as you can see on the screen, what type of entity submitted and authored those 68 non-duplicative applications. And of course, in the spirit of using data as a flashlight and not as a hammer, this is going to provide the state with a baseline of measuring a couple of things. First, where in the ecosystem we are seeing applications originate. And then second, where there's an opportunity to engage more stakeholders in this process as we seek to build a comprehensively aligned CTE and workforce system. So, starting with our first category of recommend. So we are looking forward to previewing some of the data together here. Of the 68 total applications that were complete and submitted, 19 of those applications are being recommended to the CTE Committee for approval. When we codified the applications, we were able to observe a number of trends in those applications that were successfully submitted. First and foremost, the successful applications met all 7 of the core criteria. The artifacts were of the highest quality. There was strong evidence from a variety of stakeholders, and they showed aligned potential for gainful employment within Maryland's economy. Additionally, wanted to go a little bit deeper here with some examples. Applications this round that carried particular strength, they met all 7 core criteria, with additional non-vendor third-party endorsements from local and state partners. A few examples that stand out. ABYC Marine Service Technician Certification, which was submitted by Anne Arundel County Public Schools. included endorsements from the Marine Trade Association of Maryland, with 42 signatures of the names of businesses that supported the application and the names of those businesses who have actually hired our graduates from their CAT South Marine Tech program. Another example, the National Basic Crime Scene Investigator application from LASPN, which is the Law and Public Safety Education Network. They submitted letters from the Mid-Atlantic Center for Emergency Management and Public Safety in partnership with Frederick County Community College, and they included additional letters from the Upper Shore Investment Board stating how Dorchester Tech will be able to use this IRC in their Homeland Security CTE program. And additionally, there was a letter from the Cambridge Police Department chief recognizing this certification at the secondary and the post-secondary level. Another quality application included those that were successfully recommended with all 7 core criteria and demonstrated an effective articulation agreement. For example, there's an application submitted for the American Welding Society qualification, and that in that application, the applicant provided a sample welder qualification record, evidenced its use in Maryland and Ohio, and its articulated credit to Warwick Community College's 352-hour welding program funded by MDOL's EARN grant and the WIN grant funded between MDOL and U.S. Commerce. Lastly, there was an application submitted for an electrical pre-apprenticeship program, and in that application, it was endorsed by Howard County Public Schools and Howard County Community College coming together, saying that the college specifically documented alignment between the sponsor's pre-apprenticeship program, guaranteeing that students from the pre-apprenticeship program qualified for 27 college credits towards an associate's degree at Howard County Community College. Another theme and area of best practice that we saw in the applications that were successfully recommended were that all 7 core criteria were met as the policy requires, and that a specific hiring preferences for that IRC were identified in the job description. And in doing so, these applications demonstrated crystal clear connections between the certification being proposed and Maryland's job market requests. The example we would like to lift up here is the 6 Sigma certification, which was submitted by Frederick County Community College in partnership with Baltimore County. And in that application, they go to evidence that 6 Sigma is used by many industries, manufacturing, healthcare, IT, financial services, and so on. They have evidence from large companies like McKesson, Abbott, Textron, Chevron, Xerox, and Bank of America who request this certification. And then their application linked to organizations such as the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, all highlighting 6 Sigma as an element, essential element of their work. There were also included in their application examples from numerous international and U.S. agencies recognizing the importance of this certification, like the IRS and the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, all serving as accredited providers of the 6 Sigma certification because of the importance of this certification. Next slide. Okay. Dr. Wright, I just wanted to pause because I know you sent a message earlier about the importance of rigor and quality in our work, and I wanted to share a few examples of what I thought spoke to that. Our next category, as mentioned by the CTE Committee chair, are the category of applications that are not being recommended during this first application round, and of course we encourage folks to reapply in the future. So MSDE conducted outreach within the deadlines that are established by the CTE Committee policy, as noted earlier by Pam Clay. And after providing this support, the IRC committee established that 31 of the 68 unique and non-duplicative applications are not eligible to be included in the statewide list this time around. And so I'm going to just turn the slide here because we are going to dig into this a little bit deeper to identify which applications showed particular trends so we can ensure that they are approved in the future. So, our goal again is to recommend as many IRCs as possible while respecting the policy in place. And so outlined a few samples here of suggestions and insights for our review and analysis to guide those who would want to reapply in the future. So listed here are a few factors. These are absolutely not disqualifications. We just wanted to emphasize strengths for consideration. So first and foremost, we want to ensure that artifacts are substantiating all 7 core criteria and that they are complete. So 25 of the 31 were actually applications that were just a single 1-page, 2-paragraph plain text advocacy letter stating that they supported this application, but there was no actual submitted artifacts to verify that interest. And so following up on the communication from our office is absolutely going to be vital to getting those across the finish line. Checking that applications are not duplicates, so there were a couple applications that were already on the approved list, and so we are not going to recommend those a second time for reapproval. There were some applications that there were questions about whether or not they were industry grade, and so we of course want to prioritize the strengthening of those industry credentials for our systems alignment, which is our North Star. And then there were also some applications that provided hiring preferences, as I just shared with the 6 Sigma example, that provides the MSDE committee that is reviewing these applications to really have a clear measure for the strength and external validation of industry demand. And then similarly, we want to ensure that there is alignment between the skills required for the job and those being addressed by the certification. So the example that we provided with Dorchester Sheriff's Office really demonstrated that well. And then there were some applications we saw that somewhat stretched the intended purpose of the IRC, that there were these sort of credential applications that are meant as entry points for students, but they were paired with job postings that required a doctoral degree. And so, of course, it's not a deal breaker because we want our young people to have that sense of mobility. But when all of the artifacts in the entire portfolio of applications include graduate degrees or PhDs, we want to make sure that we're just flagging that for the overall portfolio. And then this one, of course, finishes up the last slide just to tie things up here. There was also some case making done by applicants within an international scope. And so we just had a recommendation that if you're going to say that an application is portable, we want to make sure there's also evidence of it being portable within the state of Maryland. And then we saw some applications that relied solely on vendor-provided materials. So there were a number of sort of vendors that were submitting for the IRC that they offer with 25 letters on their own website from employers that they do business with. And so we were just identifying that an area of strength could be to make sure that applicants are diversifying the employer testimonials just to make sure that the criteria was effectively being met. And then lastly, there were a few examples of like blogs or news articles or opinion pieces that were submitted to verify an endorsement of some kind. And so we just wanted to highlight that anything that is on their vendor's own website or a blog might be considered a lower quality artifact. So, with that said, this kind of concludes a lot of the analysis that our team was able to pull from the first application cycle. And when you look at the cycle as a whole, there have been a few additional trends that have emerged, as the chair mentioned, and provide valuable insight for strengthening our work moving forward. So I am going to turn things back over to the committee and to Richard to carry that conversation forward.
Thank you. I think maybe the best thing here is, Richard, do you want to walk through some of the first and then we can vote on everything together? Or do you want us to vote on the proposed IRCs first and then the administrative? I'm open either way.
Yeah, I think maybe if we start voting on the approval and then the non-approval, just those MSD recommendations would be a good start.
You bet.
And then we can talk a little bit about the business rule.
Cool. Okay. So let me start by asking my fellow committee members. We received the full report in advance of this meeting, along with a spreadsheet that lists all of the applications and the rationale for each of them. So any comments, questions, concerns about what's been proposed?
I got a comment. First of all, I'm going to say, good job. That's a heck of a list. Looks like a lot of work. And what I especially noticed was that the initial list we got, we had a whole bunch of the red do not recommend, and then when it came back, there were a few that were changed from red to yellow, which I guess means you went back, asked some questions, still might need some documentation, but not a push them to the side. You're maybe. Thanks for doing that. I think that will help get more of these things done, so that students have more options.
Thank you. That's really important. I think you're highlighting something that is absolutely part of what we're trying to do here, which is, and you said it very well, the goal is to approve as many of these as we can, subject to the constraint that they have the level of rigor and achieve the outcomes that we're seeking. Really appreciate, we know that's a lot of work to help folks revise and get to the place where these can be approved. Any other thoughts? Okay, are we ready to vote? Okay. So again, just to be real clear what we're voting on, we are voting to approve those IRCs that have been recommended by MSDE, and we are voting to not approve the IRCs that have not been recommended by MSDE. The category of IRCs that are in the gray and need more work, we will work with MSDE and with the submitters to determine over the next 60 days, can they get to approval or not?
I'll make this easy on you, Myra. I will make a motion to approve all of the MSDE's recommendations, both to approve and not approve and recommend with reservation.
Like it. Okay. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Team MSDE. That part's done.
All right. So the second piece of this is as we are going through a review of the entire CTE system, one of the tasks that my team is working on is alignment of standards within CTE courses to the specific skills and outcomes associated with industry recognized credentials. As we're going through this process, we're recognizing just over the years some IRCs that have gone through name changes, or there have been updates to the actual industry recognized credential to keep up with changes in technology, for example. We see this with some of our CompTIA certifications, where the credential needs to be slightly modified in order to keep up with sort of changes in trends.
Hey, Richard, sorry. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. We are all like,
thank you,
know you very well, but for members of the public.
Yep, thank you. So Richard Kincaid, I lead the Office of College and Career Pathways here at MSDE, and this is my amazing team that has been presenting out up to this point. So on the standards review process, there are some areas where there are slight modifications that need to happen that probably don't necessitate an entire re-review of an industry recognized credential. So what we are asking you all to do is provide MSDE the authority to make administrative changes when necessary, when it doesn't require a complete overhaul or re-review of a credential. There are about 6 or 8 of these particular issues that we're looking at right now, where we need to make some of these updates. And so we'd ask you to grant us that administrative privilege to make those changes internally, and then we would report back out to you what those changes are, so that you're kept in the loop as well.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions or comments from the committee?
I just have one question, Richard. Have you guys determined or set somewhat of a threshold of what's too many changes at one time or over a period of time before you have to go through a full resubmission?
So no, we haven't really crossed one of those thresholds yet where we're like, wow, that is significant or not. Like, what does significant mean, right? The instances that we're looking at right now really do deal with naming conventions, things that don't require us to alter either the test that's given or substantially alter any of the standards that we teach in classrooms to prepare students for these particular exams. At this point, we're sort of using, for lack of a better term, a gut check. If it feels like it's fairly low level, it's something that we would administratively do. And certainly we would reach out to CTE committee staff before making, wholesale changes. But then also there are areas where some of the credentials on our list may have shifted entirely to a post-secondary credential that's not achievable by somebody in high school, right? So maybe that's one of those areas where we're like, well, it's no longer able to be obtained. So we're going to remove it from the list. We'll update the CTE committee. There are some examples, and IT would be a wonderful example of context here, where the industry is changing so rapidly. We're starting to see, for example, artificial intelligence end up in a number of credentials. These represent significant changes in what would have to be taught inside of the classroom and what a student would need to prepare. And it's in those instances, we want to make sure those significant changes continue to align to labor market data and needs within our state. So we would consider that to be a substantial change that would then have to go through that normal process that this policy sets.
Yeah, that was a great question. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, so from my perspective, this seems to make sense. I think we'll have oversight because we will see what those, kind of administrative changes are. And if we then collectively feel like, oh, wait, whoa, this is, we've gone too far, we can dial it back, but also in the spirit of expediency and not holding things up for what are really trivial changes. This seems to make sense to me. So can I have a motion to approve this change?
Motion to approve.
Yeah, thank you. A second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so that is our work on IRCs. We're going to move now to annual report. And do we have slides? Yes. Okay. So just as a reminder, we, by statute, are required to submit an annual report. Typically, that is submitted in December. We asked for a little more time to be able to flesh out a couple of the components in the annual report. And so we're going to review now what we are proposing to submit following this meeting. The first section of the report really talks about annual progress. And so over the last year, part of what we're going to be, the major progress this committee made was in setting the standards for IRCs and what counts in the 45% goal, right? This work included extensive engagement with partners and the public, and what you see here is a summary of the two policies that were issued and approved by the AIB and have now been disseminated in terms of what counts in the goal. The report has to detail progress on reaching the 45% goal. And so I don't know if it's the next slide. That's okay. So here is the data as we have it right now. And I just want to caveat this by saying I think we all recognize the data is inherently limited at the moment and not perfect because for many reasons, we just set the policy in terms of what counts as an IRC, what counts as towards the 45%. And so we don't have all the data systems in place to track that exactly the way the policy has been issued, but we'll be working on that going forward. So right now, the way we're calculating the data based on historical metrics, we're at about 9% towards meeting the goal. But again, keep in mind that this IRC completion has to do with it's using historical IRCs that were approved at the time. high school level of registered apprenticeship completion. We don't really know. There's not a designation that says this was the high school level of a registered apprenticeship. We know what registered apprenticeships are there and who has completed them, and so we're judging based on basically the age of the person who is most likely to be in high school, but we know we're not going to get it 100% right. So we have in the annual report detailed all of those caveats, if you will, but it's a start. As with many data projects, you got to start somewhere. So that's the kind of annual progress piece. Any questions on these first two components?
Just one question about the 9%. Is that just generally 9% of
the 45%?
Of the 45%.
Right.
Okay. Just want to get some
got
clarity on that.
9% of the total graduates.
Right. So like if we had a leaderboard or something, we're here a little below 10%. We're trying to get to 45%. Good question. Good clarification. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this section of the report? Okay, I do want to underscore future reports will be more precise as we are working with all the partners involved in order to report on the data, you first have to capture it in a certain way. So all of that is in progress. Okay, the next piece that needs to be included in the annual report is the annual progress targets. So we have been and this is something that we've talked about a lot here as a committee. How do we set annual targets statewide and for LEAs as well? And as you all, just as a reminder, we've taken a couple of different tacks at this, most recently looking at kind of just a backwards mapping if we need to get to 45% by the 2030-2031 school year, like what does that look like? In conversations with the AIB, and I think even conversations we've had here as a committee, it's sort of hard to really make solid annual targets without having a lot of these other components detailed, like what is the employer demand strategy? How does that cascade across LEAs? What are the barriers? So at any rate, what we have talked with the AIB about and they feel good about is instead of setting hard targets for this year to take 2025 to really to do the work, to be able to set meaningful targets that are grounded in what is possible. The report goes into greater detail, kind of explaining this, but I'm just going to give you some of the highlights. So when we think about the employer demand strategy, which is a key pillar to being able to set these targets, there's sort of three buckets that industries fall into. This is how I think about it. There's industries that already have registered apprenticeships and they're fairly well steeped, and the question for that subset is, okay, what is the opportunity to grow apprenticeships in those industries? So they already know they're already deploying apprenticeships, already offering them. How much more could we grow apprenticeships in those industries? And what are the barriers to growing them? So that's category one. Category two is there are industries that do have some registered apprenticeships, but it's not as prevalent, or they're sort of nascent. And so same question there. What would it take to build that out? What would it take for us to have more robust apprenticeships in those industries? And then the third, most nebulous area is what are for non-traditional industries with no registered apprenticeships, but where there are clearly professions and careers that are apprenticeable. How do we build out? What's the opportunity to build out registered apprenticeships in those industries? And so what we've kind of laid out in the annual report is what we need to do is basically what I just described. We need to figure out what is possible, because by doing that work, we will then be able to know what can the target even be in, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, et cetera. And so essentially what we've laid out in the annual report for this section is a plan to be able to get to meaningful targets that can then be acted upon. Part of that the first two pieces are in some ways a little more or easier and a little more accessible because these are industries that already have experience with registered apprenticeships. So you're just talking about building off of a base. The third one is really going to require very, we got to roll our sleeves up with work groups comprised of employers and experts in apprenticeships that can really think about how do you build something from nothing? How do you create apprenticeships where they don't exist today? And how do you take the expertise of industries that have built these in very robust ways and bring them to industries that don't have experience? So that is the work that's ahead of us. Then once we've if we think about those three buckets at the state level and we do the work to say, here's where we think the growth can come from each of those three buckets, then there's work to say, how does that cascade down to individual LEAs? Where might those opportunities fall county by county? And then what does that mean for both the LEAs and the local workforce boards and the employers in those counties? How do we bring those pieces together? I'd love to open it up to other members of the committee. I know we've talked about this at length, but anything I'm missing here in our discussions? Or anything else that should be considered or included in this?
Yeah, I think it's pretty comprehensive and it's indicative of what we've talked about over and over, and I think that's the whole point of our annual report, right?
That's
to
right.
ensure that that it shows our thought processes and our progress and how we want to move forward and what we've done so far. So, personally, and I think some of my other board members can agree, I think it's very comprehensive.
Great. Okay, the next section of the annual report is state of CTE. And so this is really reporting out the work of our expert review teams. As you know, we've completed 6 visits at this time. So certainly we're in no position to make broad-based, overarching, conclusions about the state of CTE in Maryland, but we're building towards that. But we have identified a couple of themes that are emerging, and that's how we've framed it. One, students love their CTE programs. They absolutely love them. They are thriving in them, and there's not enough of them. So there is not enough capacity currently to meet the demand of all of the students who would like to participate in CTE programs. And then I think, so that's a piece we recognize already. We're going to have to figure that out, right? How do we help LEAs meet the demand with resourcing? Like, what does that look like? And then also what's emerging is, and we knew this, I've said this, I know, a million times, there are regional variations in terms of what the challenges are. And so when we think about developing a statewide strategy, it's going to have to be localized because what happens county by county is just different. So any questions on this section of the report or anything that you would like John, as he's leading the expert review team, work to dig more into?
I have just some comments, Myra. And while maybe we can't talk about the grand scheme of things in the state because we've only been to a limited number, I would say that we're going to continue to see the same thing, and we've seen some pretty awesome stuff. Mm-hmm. The students want to be there, which, makes for a better learning environment. The teachers are amazing because the teachers want to be there, right? Most of these teachers at CTE, I think, or a lot of them, maybe not most, a lot of them, it's a second chance at a career for them. They've done something else, and now they're bringing that expertise into the Career and Technical Center, and they're amazing. Yesterday, we had a student brought to tears about how much she was having a good time at the school and loved her instructor because the instructor cares about us and wants us to have a good life. And and John, thanks for putting this stuff together because they've been great. And I can't wait to go to the next one. Yeah. Because it's an amazing day to sit there with those students and those instructors and see how much they care.
Yeah, amen. So more, that is why we want more of this. Okay. The last section of the annual report is the CTE framework. So we've developed, and this is not new to this group, we've been working on this, but we've now developed a 2-pager that we think is sort of the 50,000 foot, what is the vision of CTE in the state of Maryland. So I'm not going to cover all the priorities and supporting paragraphs because we've done all this, but this is the overall kind of high level vision of where we and the blueprint see the future of CTE. So one of the things that what I will say is the next step for this is to then take these broad-based strategy or priorities and break them down into individual action items. So how do we actually implement these strategies and execute these strategies? And that work we'll be doing with partners over this next year. Any questions about the framework? Okay. I know we've talked about it a lot, so I think we're all really up to speed. But for me, I think this is a big win for us and for all of the people that care about the work of the CTE committee, because it gives a real simple snapshot. If you need, what are the 4 things we care about, you can go and have a real kind of high level access, and we should be tying all of the work that we do back to these things, and that'll help us stay focused, I think. So, okay, we're going to move into vote on 2 things. So I'll tell you what we're going to vote on, then open the floor for any other questions. We need to both vote separately on the CTE framework. So just formally approve that, although we've discussed it a lot and have edited and iterated it over the last couple of meetings. Now that it's in its final form, we need to have a formal vote. And then the CTE framework will be part of the annual report, but we want to vote on submitting the annual report as well. So any other discussion that we need to have before we move to vote? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the CTE framework?
Motion to approve the CTE framework.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay, CTE framework is approved. Now may I have a motion to approve the annual report?
Motion to approve.
And second, you want to move and you'll second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay. We've got an annual report and a CTE framework that will be submitted following this meeting and made public to everyone. So thank you all. Okay. The next, we're actually doing pretty well today. I mean, nice work. Okay. The next piece that we're going to discuss today is career coaching. And I'm going to actually, in just a minute, turn that over to Molly and to Kirk Murray, who is representing the local workforce development boards. They'll talk about the proposed definitions and tentative metrics that have been developed around career coaching. But just as a reminder, one of the things that we as a committee have been asked to do is to provide some oversight and guidance on career coaching across the state. And so that involves things like, defining career coaching and the different components of it, and also measuring success. How do we know if the work we're doing in career coaching is having the intended outcome? We have to do that initial evaluation at the end of this year, and so we wanted to kind of get ahead of that and start to get a lot of input on what should those metrics be, how should we think about measuring success, and so this is not a voting item, but we wanted to get this out for everyone to be able to consume, because we will be refining this over time. We will be bringing on an evaluator, probably a third party, to come and help us do the evaluation of career coaching. So we'll want their input in the final determination in terms of those metrics. But I'm going to turn it over to you guys to share with us where we are so far, and so that thank goodness for Brian, because I would forget all of like Robert's Rules of Order and everything else. Please introduce yourselves before you get started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Myra. Molly Mesnard, Senior Advisor to the Governor's Workforce Development Board, CTE Committee.
Good afternoon. Kirkland Murray. I am the local workforce development director in Anne Arundel, but today I'm representing the Maryland Workforce Association, which is the association of the 13 workforce boards that are part of the Career Coaching Initiative.
Thank you, Myra, for that wonderful introduction. And so, you know, to kind of take a step back of how we got to where we are here, and kind of putting forward, you know, definitions and tentative metrics and so forth. As Myra noted, we do have an evaluation that's due in statute. There was no date in statute, but the AIB has a date in their implementation plan, and so that's due at the end of the year. And so as we started backwards mapping and kind of putting together, you know, what are the metrics? What are the benchmarks of success around career coaching, and really, you know, working closely with all of our partners, you know, as you start developing those, you realize, well, a lot of these terms need definitions, right? You're going to need a sort of data dictionary at the end of the day of what each element is. And so that really kind of brings it back to, you know, the need to kind of have these statewide recognized definitions. And you know, really developing some of these baseline metrics for everyone to kind of know, you know, these are some good things to capture, but also being very cognizant throughout the whole process of not making this a very cumbersome activity, not making a list of 100 data points, right? Really being kind of mindful and tailored. And so, hold on. As Myra kind of talked through the purpose of sort of today's discussion, so I won't spend much more time on that. But, you know, basically after today, you know, we can discuss any modifications and edits and so forth, and we'll talk through the process that this has gone through. And then, you know, the plan is basically we'll continue to collaborate with the AIB and the MSDE on, you know, what's the specific strategy for where these data points come from. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about some of these are already being captured, some of them could be added certain places, and really kind of, you know, map that out so that everyone has guidance and definitions and so forth. Before I turn it over to Kirk, I'll just, you know, say he'll kind of go into, you know, why the Blueprint created this career counseling program, and, you know, the purpose of the partnership and so forth. But I'll just sort of reiterate, you know, through this whole process and, you know, working both with state agencies, so primarily AIB and MSDE, and then, of course, the partners in all of this work, the local workforce boards, the LEAs, and the community colleges. And, you know, what this is requiring, what is career counseling programming requiring, is for these three partners, the local workforce boards, community colleges, and the local school district, to really build a program, you know, have an MOU, an agreement, and really have defined roles and responsibilities. And that's a lot when you consider there's 13 local workforce boards, there's 24 districts, and 16 community colleges. And so, you know, when you're trying to, you have some local workforce boards that might be working with 5 different districts. So it's really, you know, kind of coming back to earlier points that Myra is always really good at bringing us back to. It really varies across every region, across every district, what the resources are, what the, you know, capacity is, and what the approach is. So, Kirk, I'll turn it over to you.
So thanks, Molly. So as Molly said, I mean, this has been a big undertaking. I'm bringing all these partners together. So the way that I look at this, we're doing 2 things at one time. We're doing a startup and we're having a merger. So you're starting a brand new initiative. At the same time, you're bringing 3 partners that kind of worked together before, but now you're intimately working together in this. And, you know, as Molly mentioned, the local workforce boards, the LEAs, and the community colleges. And it's taken us some time to be able to build that partnership. I mean, it has taken some time, but it is starting to happen. And you know, we're now in our second full year. The first year was really a startup year where we were hiring the career coaches. We were really looking at how do we build that partnership, how do we work together. But this has been the first full year that each of the workforce boards and LEA, we're going into the school systems in partnership with the LEAs and the community colleges and starting to deliver services. And we're really starting to see a difference. We're really starting to see that students are now starting to look at their education in the lens of what is my career going to be, and really doing that. And so a lot of what we're doing, we're starting in the middle schools. In the middle schools, a lot of the different areas are doing is really getting that career well, first of all, starting with self-awareness, letting students to really understand who they are, what are their strengths, values, and interests, and really doing that, and then linking those to careers. And then the rest of the time in middle school is really doing that career exploration, giving them an opportunity to really visit businesses, have guest speakers, do field trips, and really understand that. But then ultimately, I know I'm stealing some of Molly's thunder about what's going here, but then ultimately, there's two main things that we really want to accomplish when this whole program is done. One, by the time the students get to 10th grade and they are college and career ready, that they can pick a post-college and career pathway that they want to go into. The second thing is we want to make sure that all students, when they leave the 12th grade, that they're prepared to go in the workforce. Even if they're going to college, as we know this day and age, many people are working while they're in college, so we still want them to be prepared to go right into the workforce.
And so what we've kind of outlined here are just a few pieces that's really just pulling the language out from the blueprint, making sure the funding is kind of clearly stated, the collaboration, and then of course there is an annual report required by the local workforce development boards to submit to the AIB, and then I believe that's due June 30th of each year, July 1st. And so these are kind of the elements that are, stated in the blueprint. But of course, every legislation needs a little bit of clarity, right? They can't get into all the nitty-gritty details. So as we've been, partnering in this work, we've really been doing a couple of different things to really develop these definitions and metrics. We held focus groups with a lot of the local partners. So again, local workforce board representatives, LEA representatives, and community college representatives. So people who are really doing on the grounds, boots on the ground work with this, but also leadership level were members of the focus groups. And then we also had sort of state agency partnerships and really an iterative back and forth process. Special kudos to the AIB staff and MSDE staff and so forth. So it's really been a very collaborative effort over the last 6 months. And, and also I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to two people who couldn't be with us here today. Our executive director, Rachel Stevens-Parker, who also led a lot of these public presentations and focus groups. Her and the baby are doing well, everyone. And then our strategic facilitator, Latifa Durant. So Latifa has been really, leading a lot of these focus groups and really kind of doing a lot of the back and forth edits that have come throughout this process, and really taking that and making sure the process keeps moving forward. And then also Latifa has been, through the strategic facilitation grant through the AIB, she's also been providing technical assistance to some of the local areas. So there's been some modifications to the MOU, or really starting programs and what does implementation look like. And so through that, that's given her a really great lens of, she's kind of working on this statewide definitions piece, but then also kind of knows how this is going out locally and what this looks like on the ground. So she is traveling, all is well, but she is not here today. So I just wanted to thank her as well. And just really everyone in this whole process has been tremendous. It's definitely a labor of love.
So Molly, don't forget about yourself and the leadership that's come from the CTE Committee on this. I mean, this has been a real collaborative effort in really bringing everyone together. The local workforce boards, the community colleges, the LEAs, and it's been a big lift, but it's been a very collaborative effort and really getting input from everyone to make sure this is a quality program.
Thank you, Kirk. And then in addition to that, also having several, public discussions. So we presented to the AIB Pillar 3 Advisory Committee, the Governor's Workforce Development Board meeting in December, and then, of course, this meeting here. And that's really to make sure that this information gets out there to the partners so they can see that. And then also, of course, everyone has my contact information. Let us know feedback as you're seeing these things. This just kind of goes through what our stakeholder engagement has been through the last few months, so I'm not going to spend time on that. All right. So these are basically the objectives that we've worked through between focus group input and again, state partner input of, what are the objectives of the career coaching? And it's really to explore, connect, and empower. And, we kind of try to bring back the definitions and the metrics to these points here, especially, guiding students through their strengths, interests, and values. You'll see that interwoven in our CTE framework throughout the annual report. And of course, again, the terminology we're really using to define these terms and within the metrics, connecting students and employers, and then, of course, empowering the students to develop and advance along their 6-year plan and for their future beyond graduation. Kirk, do you have anything to add on this?
Hey, Molly, can I just ask, I just want to, because I know we're about to go into some more detail, but I just want to say back to you what I think I heard, because that's how I process things. But the way I think about career coaching is, so you said this, Kirk, but middle school, this is about exposure. We want to expose students to as many career paths as we can, because I have a middle schooler. They don't know. He wants to be an NFL player. Probably not going to be an NFL player. They don't know, right? And so we want to expose them to as many different career paths as possible. And then it's like kind of a refining funnel or something as they, to your point, as they start to understand what their aptitudes and interests are. By the time they get to high school, we want to be helping them think more specifically about, well, here's the 1 or 2 paths I might want to follow, so such that I can make good decisions about my post-CCR pathway. Am I getting that right? Okay. And then the second thing I wanted to ask, so I get how this is a highly localized, each kind of county has its own. But it also seems to me like to be able to offer as robust career exploration and industry expertise as possible, we want to be sure that we're tapping into statewide expertise that might need to be deployed locally. So there are some localities that may not have access to certain industries, but we want to be able to provide students knowledge about what's possible, I guess. Does that make sense? So I'm just wondering how we're thinking about that. This has to happen at the local level, but how do we bring the resources and the knowledge at the state level such that all students have access to the same set of potentials, I guess. I don't know if I'm saying that well.
That's a very good question, and it's a very important question. So that's one of the reasons why the local workforce boards are involved in this. Whereas, for example, my colleague on the Upper Shore, he knows exactly what the demand is in his area. But if he has students and he needs expertise in cybersecurity, he could tap into the expertise in Anne Arundel County. Or if it's someone that on the Eastern Shore again, or in Western Maryland that wants to know about bioscience, they can tap into the expertise of the workforce board in Frederick and Montgomery County, where those industries. So that's the value that having the local workforce boards involved. Not only are they the subject matter expert in their area, but working through the Maryland Workforce Association and all of us working together, we can support each other to make sure students really understand that. Because you're right, you can't be an expert on everything. So really using that resource of our colleagues in the local areas, local workforce boards, to bring that expertise to those areas.
That's great. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because if you were trying to do that at each individual, it would be too resource intensive. But it's great to hear that you already have that connectivity, and certainly the Governor's Workforce Development Board could be a resource as well. And I will speak for my fellow board members to say we want to do that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on, to that point, certainly our intention would be to really provide sort of more technical assistance, and whether it's sharing of best practices, global, bringing in experts. There are low lifts or resources that we can bring in from experts across the nation as well, and really building out that community of practice space. Over the last 2 years, about once a year, we've held a convening around this for those working in the field. So trying to just find those opportunities and really working together among all of us to really kind of build that out. Absolutely.
Thank you for humoring me.
Mm-hmm.
And can I just add one thing? Because I think the important piece from this discussion is equitable access. And every jurisdiction is different. Every LEA is different. Baltimore City, we serve a very transient population. So they might be in Baltimore for a year, and then they might go to Baltimore County or Anne Arundel County. So I think expanding our bandwidth and making sure that we're meeting not just the needs of those that are in a local jurisdiction, but to get that statewide, this is what I'd like to do, and to make sure that we have the employers that are coming into all areas and not just specific areas. So, equitable access is important for me, and specifically making sure that we know the population that we serve in these jurisdictions, and that we have a very transient population.
Absolutely. And, that kind of, to your point, one of the defining terms is around all students, and really making it clear that that means all students. So anyways, I'm not going to spend time, really going through each definition here. Really, these are here to provide guidance on, what when we say, how many career coaching activities there are, when we're trying to capture that metric, what does that mean? And really, this list here is probably not hitting everything, but it's trying to be comprehensive so that, the local areas still have autonomy to make the program themselves, but also there are some clear-cut examples. Another term within the blueprint was around this individualized career counseling. And, there's kind of two, some people could think of it as, okay, individual means one-on-one, or individualized really means customized to that student. And, simply put, when we're working in the focus groups or, talking in these group meetings, when you do the math, it would be nearly impossible for some areas to do one-on-one with every student. Some schools have one career coach assigned to that school, so that would mean 2,000, 3,000 students. That's not going to happen over a year. And so really this definition and term is to really just clearly show it doesn't have to be one-on-one. There are group activities or so forth that can really be tailored to a group of students with similar interests and values. You're interested in this industry, let's go and visit this job site, and so forth, and really just making sure that is customized to that individual student. And then along those lines, that's where sort of the 6-year plan comes in. Now, that is not a blueprint term, and actually if you have any questions on it, I'll invite Richard on over here. So the 6-year plan is, basically a post-graduation plan for students. So this is something that would be developed starting in middle school, probably conversations in 7th grade, and really put on paper in 8th grade. And it's really to map out, a personalized roadmap for the student's progression. And, it incorporates career exploration, courses, and so forth. And so, MSDE over this upcoming year will be providing, much more guidance and really a template around what this 6-year plan would look like. And so but again, that's sort of the individual touch for that individual student. This is a plan that should be, updated at least annually and really be about that student's interests and strengths and so forth. all students. Again, just to reiterate, it's all middle school and high school students that must receive career counseling services, and then this just defines this further. And then the organizations, that's really just to make clear when we ask, how many organizations are involved in career coaching, just to kind of give a definition around that. So before I move on to the metrics, does anyone have any questions about the definitions?
I just want to say one thing about your point about equitable. That is very important. It's very key that we're looking at that. And, this metric around all students, it means all students. So we're looking at even, for example, in Anne Arundel County, I can speak to that because I'm living it every day. And, we're going into not only the high schools and middle schools, we're going into the Teen PAT programs. We're going into evening high school. There are even students that are still doing virtual learning. So we're making sure that all students are getting the same quality information and the same opportunities to explore different careers and to learn about those careers.
All right. And I think we've kind of talked about this already. What's the point, the purpose of putting these metrics and guidance out there? And it's really to inform those, out there doing the work. And also, obviously, from this data, and then, of course, with our evaluation, pulling out the best practices so that we can share that space, that community of practice space, and really highlight, what is working well. Additionally, there are also annual check-in conversations that the AIB organizes with each partner as a group, and MSDE and CTE committee staff are also in attendance at those. All right, so the types of metrics have kind of been broken down into 3 different categories. So the implementation metrics, I kind of think of these as sort of the input metrics. These are really, what are the resources being put into career counseling, and kind of itemizing that out. The impact metrics are more of your output or your outcome metrics. So what outcomes are the resources leading themselves to? And then the third is long-term student outcomes. Now you see here, there are no developed metrics or written down metrics around that. And that's really because, at this point, it would be hard, it's kind of hard to conceptualize how do we measure whether this has been successful long-term for students, right? Is it something where 5 years after they graduate, they have a survey and, did career coaching, did you feel like you were informed on your career pathway? Or is it looking at, in the workforce world, we look at, are you employed? Are you making a living wage and so forth? But it's hard to parse out, what's an impact of career coaching versus other things. So, right now, these aren't developed, but it is something we're just keeping in mind, as we kind of keep going through this process because, long term, obviously, we want to show that this is successful and what are the measurements to show that.
So, Madam Chair, as you and I both sit on the Governor's Workforce Board, we really need to have a conversation because also one of these metrics for long term really has to be the voice of the business community. Are they seeing a difference? Are they getting a more prepared workforce? So we really need to have those conversations. So Molly's 100% correct. This is going to take some time to come up with those long-term metrics.
Yeah,
And what can be measured?
I want to offer maybe a contrarian view on this, which is I think we need to think about those long-term. We may not have the exact metrics, but like if we don't think now about what does good look like, then all of the like activity metrics won't necessarily lead to anything. So that's one of the things I was thinking about reviewing the materials. Like I would like us to coming out of this meeting, I think we should think about what difference will it make that if we've implemented this successfully, then what is that going to mean? And I think we all know, like, from a feeling level we know, but we should really articulate that and then figure out what are some potential ways that we might measure it. It doesn't mean that we're going to get it all right, but I worry about not really saying, here's where we're trying to, when the paint's dry, this is what the masterpiece looks like. So I don't know. I think we should do that work now.
Absolutely. I think, we certainly have jotted down ideas, and so we sort of welcome, and we can share that with members here for feedback and really kind of, sort of the next stage, really kind of dig in. Also, depending on sort of the resources and getting an evaluator and so forth on board and really getting that expertise, will I think really help move that along as well.
Yeah, and I think, Kurt, to your point, thinking about what are the stakeholders that we're trying to impact here, business community is certainly one of them. And so I think it's worth our thinking about that now. Yeah, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to completely agree with you, Myra. I think one of the things, especially as we look at the long-term outcomes and impact of the work that we're doing today, we have to set up measurements of success over long-term and track that. So if we don't include things like employer sentiment, and we don't track employer sentiment, and we get to 45, and then all of a sudden we ask employers, and they're like, oh, they weren't no better than they were originally, right? So it's going to be a problem.
Yes,
So
that's right.
I do think it is important that we think through this, we begin to map it out,
Yep.
and maybe there'll be changes over the years and slight tweaks on what we track and whether we design net promoter scores or from a qualitative perspective or just track basic employment outcomes. I think it's important that we begin to do that so that as we are implementing, we can continue to track the year-to-year outcomes.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm volunteering us to help
Great.
give feedback on that.
Terrific, terrific. So we'll, as I said, we've got something started, and we'll keep on bringing it forward to share with you all. All right, so before you are some of the proposed metrics. This kind of just puts them into their two buckets, and really just to iterate that the implementation metrics, most of those are already collected in the AIB's current report template that the local workforce boards have to turn in. And so that's pretty like turnkey, that's already something being collected. And then for the impact metrics, those would be new metrics, but a lot of them, working in the focus groups and so forth, a lot of them are already being collected to a degree. And so again, this is just sort of streamlining it across the state. So I'm not going to spend too much time going through each metric. As you see here, we're trying to be very, clear what it needs to be disaggregated by, where the data source comes from so that people are aware. Basically the implementation metrics come down to, what's the budget, where was it actually spent, number of career coaches hired and so forth. And then there's a requirement that they complete some training, some of it's MSDE required training. And then sort of a new metric in this area would be, number of businesses and organizations that supported your career coaching efforts this year. And again, that's just sort of to really reiterate the importance of getting employers engaged in all of this. All right, and then for the impact metrics, again, a lot of this is sort of measuring the percent of students who, for instance, complete their 6-year plan before beginning high school, and, basically have identified their strengths, interests, and values. And, that can be collected in different sort of ways, surveys and so forth. There's the percentage that have completed their career assessments. And then, of course, participating in career exploration activities. And again, it's just trying to define these terms really, really clearly. And then, of course, the percentage of 10th graders with identified post-CCR pathways. Let me get to the last one. Okay. And then, of course, those graduating with post-graduation plans. So before I move on from the metrics, any questions or thoughts on the metrics as proposed?
Yeah, I think it's a good start. I do challenge the idea of how we're categorizing them from impact versus long-term outcomes. I actually think these are the outcomes and the impact is the secondary piece. And it may create some clarification on the impact is how is it affecting business? How is it affecting the students long term? How is it affecting the community long term? Versus the outcomes is how many students completed, how many students did this. So just for clarification purposes, there may be a piece in which you rethink the categorization.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, and kind of flip flopping that. I think when we're thinking of long-term outcomes is more, once they graduate and so forth. But yes, I think that's why I know in my head I've been thinking of implementation as sort of the immediate outcomes, short term you could call it maybe, and so that's good. That's helpful.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, first, this is a great start. And I know I wasn't able to be at the December Governor's Workforce Development Board meeting, so I didn't get to hear all of that discussion, but I'll go back and review it at some point. But I think this actually highlights what we're talking about, which is like, I think of these kind of metrics as activity metrics. So it's like, did we, percentage of people that completed this thing or did this thing or da-da-da. And then I always ask the question, to what end? Okay, so 100% completed their 6-year plan. And so then what happened, right? Because the goal is not actually for them to have a 6-year plan. It's for them to have a better outcome on the... And so I think we're really close here. We just need to, if we do some work on that back end and get some folks in a room just focusing on that, we can then backwards map to some of this, and it might shift a little bit of the way some of those metrics, I think, flesh out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, one way that we'll be able to sort of measure some of the impact and outcome is through the sort of surveys and focus groups.
Yeah.
And so that process, that's where kind of the next slides kind of bring us. But, that's really for our evaluator to map out exactly, what are the exact questions, what are the exact, sample size and everything like that. Somebody with much more expertise than myself, but, and really kind of bring out both that qualitative and quantitative data of how this is impacting not just the students, but also, we kind of go into it, but the career coaches as well. How is this working for them? And so, so that kind of brings us into this section. And so, basically we've been talking about surveys, partly because, initially I know the AIB outcome measures work group, they have sort of just one metric right now around career coaching, and it is, I think, student satisfaction. Yeah. So, a lot of the local areas are already doing some sort of survey, maybe not across the board. And so, we kind of just have to think through, they're kind of doing their own surveys. And then there's also MSDE does a annual, I think it's called a culture survey. And so that could maybe be a place where we could plug in just a few questions. And so really kind of thinking through, what are the survey questions and sort of what are the best avenues to collect that. And then, of course, the other element would be using focus groups. So, as you know, on our expert review team visits, we do focus groups with students, and we do focus groups with career coaches. So already we're collecting, just a good broad data, but of course the questions and expert review team visits are broad for students. And, over time, I think I've been noticing a trend. They're starting to understand more, like who their career coach is. At first, I didn't know if we were confusing them with the guidance counselor. And that's a very, one of the initial points of calling this career coaching is to sort of distinguish from the school counselor. But I'm definitely seeing them kind of engaging more and really understanding the sources and the opportunities that their career coach has. And so anyways, looking more at our focus group questions to really dig in and get some more information. So I'm not going to spend time going through these. These are pretty much, a lot of this process has been, we're getting information from so many different partners, and it's important to have it all somewhere and then to keep iterating and editing and so forth. And so, these could be potential questions, but again, would like an evaluator to officially decide. All right. So, just again, a reminder on the next steps. Of course, we'll be sort of updating this draft based on the discussion today and sharing that out with you all. And then really continuing to work closely with AIB, MSDE, and the other partners in this on, what's the specific strategy for the certain data points that make sense to start collecting, and really, providing some guidance on the definitions and so forth. And then, of course, we're already working on what sort of resources in order to conduct our evaluation. And so, we'll keep you all updated on that. But eventually, having an official evaluator to, review and decide, okay, these are the things that we're going to be measuring in our evaluation, and these are the avenues that we're going to do that. And then, of course, through all this process, throughout all of this, our focus groups and like Latifah's work as well, really getting an understanding, to Myra's point, of what is needed, what are the trainings needed, where are the gaps, and how can we, collaborate on all of our resources, pool our resources together in order to provide some of that technical assistance and the training that's needed. So any other questions on career coaching?
I just want to say I know that a ton of work has gone into this, and I think that you guys have gotten us to a really good place, and there's a few other things we need to kind of incorporate, but that is the work. Like, we're creating something that hasn't existed before. So I'm really excited about this, and I am, to what Michael was saying, I'm really excited about the ability to provide the same set of opportunities to all students. It's one of the things that I fundamentally believe, this idea that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity isn't. And a lot of that actually has to do with just where the family you're born into, where you live, what you look around and see in your community, the potential careers are. And if you don't know, and this was me, I didn't know, I'm the daughter of a preacher and a teacher. I never thought I would be the CEO of a company. I didn't see women doing that when I was growing up in my community. And we have an opportunity to provide that kind of exposure, such that we create a more equitable labor market and access for students. So I think this piece is fundamental to that, and I'm really excited for us to continue working on it together. So, thank you. Anything else on career coaching? So next steps, you guys, we're going to do some more work. I'm definitely signing up for helping to think about the long-term, what those, long-term outcomes are, and we'll continue to work on this, and when it's ready for a vote, we'll bring it back to the committee. Okay, we did really well today, people. I mean, yeah, we got a lot done, and we have, we're going to finish early. I'm super excited. I do want to just go through a couple of updates just for awareness. There are a number of state initiatives to expand registered apprenticeships. Just want to make sure they're on everyone's radar. We talked before about the Governor's Apprenticeship Pledge, which is aiming to recruit 500 employers and 5,000 apprentices by next year. So that's very ambitious. Also, I want to, the RAISE Act was just dropped, if you will. I'm not going to use the right language, but at any rate, over the last, week and a half, something like that. And the idea behind this is establishing the Maryland Office of Registered Apprenticeship Development in the Department of Labor. It creates 2 new programs to both help employers and workers participate in registered apprenticeship programs. So lots of really impactful, initiatives in that act, and that's going to be working its way through session. And then on the horizon, the Apprenticeship 2030 Commission final report is going to be coming out in the coming weeks. And so, again, there'll be a number of recommendations, not just about high school level of registered apprenticeship, but apprenticeship writ large for the state. And then there's also there have been, you may have seen the governor's announcement about philanthropic investments that are being made to really support the work of expanding registered apprenticeships. So a lot of great momentum from where I sit, and just want to make sure everyone is aware. Anything else? Anyone else? Did I forget anything, Molly? And anyone else want to share anything we need to know as a group? Yeah. It's coming. It's coming. I have faith. You know I'm an eternal optimist, Brian. Okay. If there's no further items for discussion, then, oh, sorry. See, I did forget something. You're supposed to tell me that. This was a recap of the Maryland Business Summit on engaging the future workforce, brought together 150 leaders from industry, policy, community sectors. It was a great event from what I hear, a lot of connectivity, bringing those sectors together, and a lot of talk about the immense potential and value of young workers, so very apropos of the work we do here.
And Sharnetta was there. I don't know.
Oh, that's right. Sharnetta, tell us how
Yeah.
you can speak firsthand.
Yes, absolutely. No, it was an amazing day. You know, even my organization was able to make connections with both workforce driven agencies and educational institutions that are trying to create opportunity. But I think what it did was it catered to the idea that both business and community and agency can all work together to kind of set goals and drive forward. So I thought it was an amazing day. I thought it was something that I would love to see more of, and continued growth. I think more businesses would be inclined to participate as they hear more word of mouth. So I do think it can be bigger next year, but it was an amazing opportunity.
We need to get some testimonials on the website or something like that. I don't know. We need to do a little marketing campaign for next year's event.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. So next steps, we're going to submit the annual report with the CTE framework. All of that was approved today, so we'll move forward there. We're going to continue the work on career coaching, as we discussed, and we'll be working on, part of what we talked about in our annual report. We're going to be working on this employer demand strategy, and then starting to plan for the May, June strategic planning and implementation retreat. We are looking to get that scheduled. Anything else we need to?
The next meeting's in April.
Yep, next meeting is April 10th in Calvert County, right? Okay. So if there's nothing further, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, sure. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. We are adjourned. All right.
Thank you so much.